On the 1st of November at Blizzcon in 2019, we finally had full confirmation that Blizzard had been working on the next installment of the Diablo series, Diablo 4. Along with the reveal of Diablo 4, we got the first cinematic, titled By 3 They Come, which was yet another showcase from Blizzard's cinematic department that really captured the spirit of Diablo 1 and 2. Also set the expectation for a return to the darkness seen in the earlier games for Diablo 4. We are dropped straight back into the world of Sanctuary that is all too familiar and overrun by demons. We are shown a bleak future after the events of the previous game, Diablo 3, where Sanctuary has been left with millions slaughtered and has been suffering from the ongoing eternal conflict. Blizzard's cinematic team have a reputation for creating some incredible work, and it was no different this time around for Diablo 4, captivating the BlizzCon audience both live and online.
By 3 they come. By 3 thy way opens. By the blood of the willing, we call thee home. Hail, daughter of hatred, creator of sanctuary. Hail, Lilith.
The trailer also revealed the return of Lilith to the world of Sanctuary, an important character in Diablo lore, but one which we had only seen as an uber-boss in Diablo 2 up until now.
Blessed Mother, save us.
It was at this point that we learned Diablo 4 would have an open world, containing 5 regions that could be navigated through on a mount. The towns would be social hubs, and there would be world bosses and other events. We were also told that the endgame was already set up, with keyed dungeons being a main focus. At this BlizzCon, the first 3 of the 5 classes appearing in Diablo 4 were revealed. These classes were all beloved characters from Diablo 2, and have become staples of the ARPG genre: the Barbarian, the Sorceress, and the Druid, the melee, spellcasting, and hybrid archetypes. By the end of the weekend of BlizzCon 2019, we'd received a lot more information about the upcoming game, and a lot more detail about what had been shown. The classes, although familiar, had been updated, each getting their own unique mechanics based around the class fantasy. The Barbarian now has access to an arsenal system, allowing the player to swap between different weapon types to engage with the differing skills that require those weapons. The Sorceress had the new chilling mechanic shown, meaning the more cold damage dealt to an enemy, the more they would be slowed, frozen, and eventually shattered. And the Druid's shape-shifting abilities were shown off, where the player would get access to a host of new skills when in the different human, werebear, and werewolf forms. At this time, each character was set to have a permanent progression system, where each class had unique skill and talent trees. Skill points were earned from leveling, as well as from rare tomes found out in the world of Sanctuary. You could only access a limited number of skills and talents, but multiple points could be put into each to make them more powerful. Each region in Diablo 4 was set to be distinct, and with the open world, the player would be able to travel between regions seamlessly at any time. Skosglen, home of the Druids, rainy, heavily forested, and borders the coast. Here we find the Drowned, a new enemy type to Diablo. Fractured Peaks, snowy and secluded, and devout priests find refuge in this mountain range. Dry Steppes, unforgiving and harsh, the occupants of this land will do anything to survive. Beware of savage cannibals. Hawazar, witches and zealots reside in the swamplands. And Kyrgyzstan, we've visited Alcarnus and Chaldeum in the desert before, and these places may harbour a rising group of cultists. The first world boss, Ashava, was shown in both the playable Blizzcon demo and with a gameplay trailer. And the last big Diablo 4 topic that Blizzard managed to talk about that weekend was itemization. We got our first look at what they had been working on, and some ideas that they had already with regards to items. A familiar sight in the normal, magic, rare, legendary and set items, and a return to ancient items seen previously in Diablo 3. Here they mention that mythic items are the highest tier, but that items would be simplified for players to easily see an attack and defense value. In a similar vein to Diablo 3, legendary powers were to make a return, but also runes from Diablo 2. Not quite the rune words from Diablo 2, these were set to be condition runes and effect runes that could be socketed into items to create powerful combinations. At this point, BlizzCon had come to a close. The reveal of Diablo 4 was complete, and it was now up to the audience to offer thoughts and reactions on what they had seen and heard. During, and shortly after the initial announcement of Diablo 4, there was plenty of online discussion and feedback on what had been revealed. The developers seemed keen to hear what the future player base would have to say about their work, and they actively encouraged forum posts and social media messages. They had also promised regular updates in the form of blog posts. These were to keep the player base updated on what Diablo 4 looked like as it was being developed, and allowed time for feedback to be given and acted on. The first blog post was just that. After feedback from the announcement, the first blog post got stuck straight into players' initial concerns. Items were a big topic that obviously became a focus for continued development. They made it clear that they were still looking at item progression, as well as how the different stats and affixes fit into the new game. Here they stated that ancient items were to be looked at again, and they were discussing different options for an item progression system that would no longer include this level of loot. They also addressed the concerns that, just like Diablo 3, it appeared all of the character's power would come from the items that they were wearing. They let us know that the character's skill points would hold a significant portion of their power, and that items and skills should work in combination. At the start of December, only 1 month after the BlizzCon reveal, we got part 2 of this system design blog. This time we got a real in-depth look at some itemization changes they were already thinking about from the feedback. Affixes on items are a big topic for ARPGs, and the low number of affixes shown so far was a concern for players. This was addressed as they stated that they would add more stats to all tiers of items in the game. Conditional affixes, such as strength requirements to equip certain items, have existed in previous Diablo titles, as well as other popular ARPGs. However, Blizzard introduced a whole new set of character stats and item requirements to be discussed in this blog. Angelic power, which increases the duration of all beneficial effects. Demonic power, which increases the duration of all negative effects. And ancestral power, which increases the chance of on-hit effects. With this, we can see they were still undecided on how they wanted items to ultimately be in the game, but that they were very happy to take feedback and experiment with different ideas at this early stage. The more simple attack and defense stats were criticised, and this was addressed here. They still liked the idea of showing these stats on certain items, but did agree that not all items needed to have these numbers, and that gearing a character should not be solely based on just green arrow up, red arrow down choices. Ancient items were addressed again, where they mention the usefulness of rare items, but also reference a new type of consumable that would drop from monsters and contain a legendary affix that could be applied to non-legendary items. In February of 2020, we were introduced to the quarterly blog format, a way in which Blizzard felt they could openly discuss what they were working on, the state of the game, and areas they were making progress. This would also allow for community feedback to be given on the topics they bring up, and time to address this feedback and potentially make changes. With some feedback from BlizzCon itself still being worked through, the topic of UI is opened in this first blog post of 2020. Here they make it clear that different sized items would not be making a return to Diablo, but they were working on the overall look of the items in the inventory. They also show an updated character screen with the new angelic, demonic and ancestral values on it, as well as the adjusted inventory. Since quite a few people got to try out the short demo of the game at BlizzCon, it was discovered that the left mouse button could not be bound from casting the primary skill to force move. It was surprising to the community that this had not been considered, as it had been addressed in previous titles, and most ARPGs have the option to bind your character's primary skill to another key and use the left mouse button as move only. The next section of the blog talks about the placement of the action bar and their decision to move the bar back to the centre of the screen for PC players. The bar being on the left works well when further from the screen, so is a better solution for console players. Here they confirm controller support for PC, and they split UI for couch co-op on console. For Diablo 4, the development team seemed to be putting a large focus on monster types, animations, and interactions. They had already introduced the idea of monster families, and in this blog they took the opportunity to look slightly more in depth at the cannibals they planned to put in the game. They were looking to make combat more meaningful, and for each monster to play a different role in an encounter. Designing different monsters with different weapons and styles of attacks would be their way to achieve this, whilst keeping the theme of each monster pack consistent. The blog post for June of 2020 was all about internal testing, and how they could use blocking out or greyboxing to play areas before they had been fully finished. As previously shown at BlizzCon, Diablo 4 would make much more use of in-game cutscenes for storytelling. They mentioned some technical ways that they would achieve this with camera angles and character movements, but that they would move away from the Diablo 3 approach of having UI panels and character portraits to move the story along. Here the open world was addressed once again with a nice looking heat map from the playtesters' activities in-game. They stated that they were using this data to design the maps and areas around the activities the players were engaging with the most. One such open world activity are the camps, important locations that have been overrun by enemies. Once the player clears out this location, the area becomes friendly, a waypoint becomes available, and the area becomes inhabited by NPCs. Items were hit upon once again, with it being made very clear that they were still working with different options and could still go in a different direction, but we were given a brief look at what was in game at this time. For the final quarterly update blog post of 2020, we are presented with some massive game system changes. In the September update, they conceded that the ancestral, demonic, angelic powers were not pointing the game in the direction the players were expecting, and that further changes were going to be made to these character stats. They were, however, going to keep working on some new ideas that the stat thresholds had given them. At this time we also got to see the full rework of both the active and passive skill systems that Blizzard had been working on with the introduction of this new skill tree. They went with an actual tree this time as a rebuttal to the community calling the original system a skill twig. This tree contains all the active skills that your character can choose in the top section. As you level, you allocate points in those skills, and along the way you will reach some nodes that will grant a passive skill point. This passive skill point could then be placed into the passive skill slots in the roots of the tree. They also show some examples of upgrade nodes here that could change and enhance a skill that you have chosen. We also got to hear about the Sorceress enchantment system in this update. With Diablo 4, Blizzard want to enhance the idea of class identity by giving each class its own specialization. We had already seen the Barbarian Arsenal system and the Druid's shapeshifting. The enchantment system allows the Sorceress to choose any active skill, putting it in the skill bar to be cast as normal and in an enchantment slot, gaining some powerful secondary effects. By the time the December blog came, plenty of feedback had been given on the reworked skill tree system, and the direction seemed positive, although further iteration was clearly needed. They seemed to also settle on the idea of meaningful choices here, and made a clear statement that respecking the skill tree would not be free. Stat points make a return. One key feature of Diablo 3 was that your character automatically gained their stat points after leveling up. Unlike Diablo 2, where you were given a limited number per level and had to choose whether strength, dexterity, energy or health were what your character needed to become more powerful. Here we got to see Diablo 4 return to this classic system with strength, intelligence, willpower and dexterity being added, as well as the ability to choose where your points go upon leveling up. The next part of this final blog of 2020 gave us an update on where the previously shelved stat requirements ended up. Upgrades on the skill tree now have gained secondary effects that can be unlocked by meeting the required stat values. Moving on to the itemization section of the blog, we start with weapon types. Weapons have been given a bit more of an identity at this point, with each weapon gaining stats only found on that weapon type. Here we see block value on the shield, crit strike chance on the wand, and a chance to inflict bleed on an axe. After an excursion through different types of items, with varied stats and different progression systems, we now land on the more traditional magic, rare, legendary territory. Here we see that more stats appear on a rare, however the magic item rolls a higher value. In this iteration we have a familiar sight again for Diablo 3 players with the legendary affixes, however unlike Diablo 3 these can roll on any item. And a new addition to Diablo 4 loot is the return of unique items. Last seen in Diablo 2, unique items are back, and this time they get their own fixed legendary style affix. After the in-person Blizzcon that should have taken place in 2020 was cancelled, a plan to hold an event remotely online was made. Blizzconline 2021 hit our screens in February and gave us a look at the fourth class coming to Diablo 4, the Rogue.
Now, pray with me. May Akarat guide and protect me.
May Akarat guide and protect me.
May he shepherd my soul
May he shepherd my soul
and grant it mercy.
And granted mercy.
What are you doing here? This is not the time.
But this is confession. And I have sinned. I was a thief who stole from those more fortunate. I strayed from your light and found my trade in the shadows. They call it murder. I say, job well done. thief, a heretic, a murderer, Father. Will Akarat save me?
You mock our light. But those monsters were a scourge upon my flock. And you were the answer to their prayers.
Then we are settled, and you owe me.
The name you seek is... Thank the heavens for you.
Heavens? I assure you, Father, the heavens didn't send me.
The rogue appeared in Diablo 1 as the hybrid martial class to complement the warrior and the sorceress. The class brings a huge amount of mobility to make use of both long-range and melee weapons. This was also a showcase for Blizzard's new in-game cutscenes, as this trailer was made in the Diablo 4 engine. The rogue fills the gap in the Diablo 4 class lineup, as it can fill the ranged martial class archetype, whilst also offering a melee playstyle, and also the ability to combine these in a hybrid form. Imbuements were showcased here, as well as some shadow type abilities that would be new to the Diablo series. For the second quarter of 2021, we got back to the blog posts, with a deep dive into the art and visuals of the upcoming game. Although this blog post didn't hit gameplay mechanics, itemization, or in-game activities, it shows a clear direction in the visual content within the game. We have already seen some trailers and some gameplay footage, but a blog post like this really solidifies the visual aspects of the game, where they have come from, and how they are thinking about visual details in this new interpretation of Diablo. With the criticism of Diablo 3's colour palette clearly in mind, the development of Diablo 4's visuals have been firmly rooted in a more realistic and gritty tone. We haven't really seen any bright colours at this point. Here we get to see how the team have been working on character animations to make them seem both realistic but function smoothly within the game. This has a huge impact when playing the game. Fluid movement from skill to skill and animation cancelling have real implications as to how a character feels to play. So to see the effort and advances made in these animations shows that Diablo 4 would be set to both look like a modern AAA game, but also feel really good to play. The blog post for October of 2021 hit on sound design. As the previous blog focused on the art, this one focused on the audio elements of the game. Visuals are one thing, but without good sound to go with it, the game would be incomplete. Sound often goes unnoticed in games, and is usually only talked about when it's bad. So it's nice to see Diablo's audio team get some of the limelight here, and also to hear more of what to expect from the overall atmosphere of the game. We also got a neat little behind the scenes video to show us some of the ways the team recorded some of the effects we would hear in game. We reach the end of 2021 and get our final blog post of the year. This one presents us with another look at items and endgame systems. Good news for Diablo 2 players, plus skills can now be found as an affix on items. This is great to bolster the skills that you have specialised in and allocated skill points to, but also for grabbing a utility skill or two without having to use some of those valuable skill points. This is our introduction to the Occultist, a new vendor to be found in-game. This new vendor is here to serve a new purpose, one which has not been needed in Diablo before. Now that legendary affixes can appear on any item, the player may require a way to take an affix from one item and place it onto another. Items can be given to the Occultist to gain its essence. This destroys the item, but gives you the legendary essence that can then be applied to a rare item, turning it into a legendary with the same affixes that it previously had as a rare, but with the added legendary power. And here we are shown the endgame progression system they said they were working on. The Paragon board is a new addition to the series. Diablo 3 and Diablo Immortal players will be familiar with the Paragon systems in those games, but the implementation here is quite different. At level 50 the Paragon board is unlocked, and you can allocate points gained to tiles on the board. They show us some examples of tiles here. Normal tiles contain simple plus to stats. Magic tiles give a bit of an offensive or defensive boost. Rare tiles give more substantial power increases, but also have some of those stat requirements that were moved from items. We get one legendary tile per board. These are set to provide a big power spike for characters that have enough Paragon points to reach them. Each board also has a socket that glyphs can be inserted into. These have a radius that overlays the Paragon board. Tiles allocated within that radius will give access to bigger, more powerful character buffs. Also, the boards rotate. This system is built to allow players to decide the appropriate stats and buffs for their character and track out a path through the boards to pick up those nodes. The first quarterly update of 2022 was another in-depth art blog. In this blog we are shown a detailed look at some of the new environments that we will get to explore in Diablo 4. The new parts of Sanctuary that we have not been to in the previous games. They continue to express that the game will return to the darkness, moving away from the more cartoonish style of Diablo 3 and back to the dark, low fantasy gothic horror of Diablo 1 and 2. Here we are also shown Kyovashad, the main town in Fractured Peaks, during a night cycle. On the 12th of June 2022, we got confirmation that Diablo 4 would be releasing in 2023. On the following day we got another blog post. The return to darkness was now complete with the final class reveal of Diablo 4, the Necromancer.
Those bold enough to cross the line of sin for deeper knowledge, who follow an unquenchable yearning, born of blood and bone, to unlock the forbidden secrets and foulest black rituals, calling forth life from death. To truly embrace this power, you must take it into the world. And you will be shunned, scorned, marked as a living sacrifice to this profane knowledge. You will be a priest of Rathma, a necromancer. And you will not confront the darkness alone. We are the speakers of the dead. And the dead have no mercy.
The Necromancer class fills the next missing ARPG archetype, the Summoner. In Diablo 4, the Necromancer is set up to have several different playstyles. Bone skills make a return, with fan favourites such as Bone Spirit and Bone Prison. A new set of skills, available to the Necromancer in Diablo 4, are the Darkness skills. And Blood skills are back again. Filling the archetype of Summoner, minions are a large part of the Necromancer arsenal, and will be a big part of the new game. We get to see some of the class specializations here, with the Book of the Dead. These are based around either having certain minions, or sacrificing minions for other buffs. The August update is all about the extras that are planned for the game. Diablo players are familiar with Seasons, since ladder resets were added to Diablo 2. Seasons played a big role in keeping Diablo 3's player base engaged, and the plan is clear that Seasons will be a big thing for Diablo 4 as well. These seasonal updates will allow for the addition of new content, as well as meta-changing balance updates. The seasonal journey found in Diablo 3 will be making a comeback in its new form with the new game. The Battle Pass and the shop are shown in this update, with the new monetization model for the game. The final development update for 2022 came in the form of a live stream. This will be the first in a series of live streams that would become the new way for the developers to present their progress with the game in the run-up to the launch. In the talk, the developers go over some of the things that have already been revealed, answer some community questions, but also we get the reveal of the new Codex of Power. Here they talk about how each dungeon will have a legendary power that can be unlocked by completing it. This then gives you access to the legendary aspect that can be used to craft a legendary item with that power. This is set to make it easy to target a legendary for your character and complete the dungeon to get it, rather than waiting for that power to drop on an item. February's update was the first for 2023, and was all about the upcoming beta weekends. One closed and one open. These 2 weekends would allow players to jump in and play the first section of the game and explore the first zone. The beta was limited to level 25, and the world boss would be available. The developers then went on to give an in-depth explanation of how armor works in Diablo 4, how it is different to the previous games, and their expectations for how much damage mitigation a player will have at different levels. They showed how gaining more armor offers diminishing returns at higher levels. They explain how a player may approach damage mitigation in the game, and how a player can choose to take more armor and damage reduction within the skill tree, the Paragon boards, items, and legendary aspects. In the next part of the update, they talk about strongholds. These strongholds are events in the open world that a player can choose to interact with. We have seen them as camps in previous updates. They show off a stronghold in game and explain that once a player unlocks a stronghold, they will gain access to waypoints, NPCs, vendors, and side quests. Over the following few months, in the lead up to the launch of Diablo 4, we got a few more blogs and videos going over some different aspects of the game. In the endgame update, we got to see a full rundown of all the systems that have made it to the final version of the game. The Codex of Power, the Paragon boards, Nightmare Dungeons, Hell Tides, and the Tree of Whispers are all shown in this April video update. We also got a graphics blog update. This more technical blog went over some of the ways the graphics team managed to convert the artistic vision of Diablo 4 into a game. They show some examples of lighting, and also discuss how they take advantage of some modern technologies to optimize for both graphic fidelity and performance. And in a live stream in May, we got a further look at what seasonal content will mean for the post-launch future of the game. The early access launch went live 4 days before the official launch on the 6th of June 2023. Diablo fans with early access got stuck straight into the game. Press reviews started to come out, and just as Diablo 3 did 11 years before, Diablo 4 was breaking records. The game generated $666 million in revenue within the first 5 days after launch. The game was initially received quite favourably by the audience, however, as more and more players leveled up and got into the endgame, some criticism started to form. The development team are set to continue working on the game, seasonal updates are planned for every 3 months, and expansions are on the way.